and welcome to Classical Schmassical, the anti-classical classical music podcast. Tune in every Saturday as we discuss, deconstruct, and dissect what it means to be a musician in the modern world. I'm your host, Alexa Letourneau. I use any pronouns, and our guest this week is Lena Smith.
Hi, Alexa. So, for everyone watching, listening, my name's Lena Smith. I use they, them pronouns, and I'm a trombonist. I currently go to Illinois Wesleyan. I'm going into my senior year, and I'm majoring in instrumental performance.
Yeah, that's amazing. I know, it's so good to see you again. It's been so long, and obviously my time at Illinois Wesleyan was cut super short because of COVID, and so we didn't really get to say goodbye. And it's just so nice to see you again, and I'm so excited to have you on. It's our first trombonist on the pod, which is super exciting. Yeah. So especially since trombone is something that is so different from the other brass instruments, I wonder if you could start out with our sort of stock question, which is, what do people get wrong about the trombone, and especially writing for the trombone, but really in general?
I think a lot of people think that trombone is a really difficult instrument, when in fact I feel, yeah. I mean, to be fair, I've been playing for forever, so of course I'm oh yeah, it's super easy. But
sure.
The misconception is that, it doesn't have keys, it doesn't have buttons. How do you play this thing?
Yeah.
It definitely becomes a muscle memory, kind of second nature thing that you kind of just pick up as the years go on. People are oh, how do you know where this position is? It's kind of give and take.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing is that people also always think that there's exactly 7 positions, but I basically play one big tuning slide. So there's yeah, there are 7 positions, but there's kind of some leeway. I have teachers say that there are infinitely many positions.
Yeah, that's so interesting too. And I know I've recently been getting into playing microtonal music, and it's made me very envious of I want just a slide that I can just adjust instead of I'm gonna contort my and pull my air down and half hold this key and I don't know, just move it. So I definitely feel that. Yeah. Who are some composers who really get how to write for the trombone? My first ever concerto actually was written for trombone, and I know you've taken a look at it, and I don't think it's very effective because I wrote it like a flute concerto because I was playing a bunch of concertos, and I was great, I can write a concerto. And then I got a good performance of it, but that was more due to a mutual friend of ours being a phenomenal player. But then it is it's a hugely difficult piece, and not one that I would feel comfortable giving to someone now. So for someone like me who doesn't know trombone rep, what are some good pieces to listen to get that idea?
Composer wise, I'm a big fan of Kelly, just period. In general. Okay. Love his music so much. I am never bored when we get a Kelly piece. Yeah. I feel he very much knows how to write for trombone and understands the power behind trombone. A lot of the times if brass is very much okay, you're going to play whole notes for 3 years and you're going to have a really powerful line for 8 measures and that's it.
I would never write something like that.
Sometimes it's good on the chops though.
Okay, fair.
So I feel Kelly is very much distributing those really powerful lines throughout the music, and not just okay, let's have them do this for 8 measures and then enough of you kind of thing.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, Kelly's I don't know. I feel his flute parts are very nondescript, but there's there's a lot of people out there writing fun flute parts. I think we're very privileged in that way. Yeah. Are there other specific pieces or concertos or sonatas or things that you'd recommend listening to or checking out?
Ooh, I worked on a piece called Deux Danses by Michael Defy, and it was absolutely gorgeous. I think it had a lot of good trombone techniques, a lot of sliding, glissandos, that kind of thing, while still being extremely beautiful. I was a big fan of the piece because it had a nice contrast of really beautiful parts, but also really powerful parts. I think the trombone has a lot of good versatility that isn't utilized enough,
Yeah, definitely. To that end, can you give go into a little bit of detail about things that the trombone really does better than other instruments or like extended techniques, that kind of thing that are really specific? Because it is so different from
Yeah.
like, yeah, I don't know. I just don't know how trombones work at all.
To be fair, I don't either.
That's fair.
I think obviously the one fun thing about trombone is like the slide, the glissandos, the smears, all like the kind of nasty stuff that like you really get like a really good sound out of it by
Yeah.
playing glissandos. I know that like other instruments can by giving like a little flourish or something like that.
Sure.
But a true glissando is comes from the trombone, and I think not a lot of composers utilize it. I think it could
Mhm.
be done way more. So whenever I see a gliss in a piece, I get so excited. And whenever a conductor asks for more, I'm like, oh, you want more? I got it. I got you.
Yeah. Are there other like extended technique kind of things that you have? Like I don't really know what's available. Even in the whole brass world is kind of like ah.
It's a little scary. Yeah.
Yeah.
What have I been working on recently? I've been trying a lot of growling recently. I'm not sure if that's like a woodwind thing.
Ooh, I don't growl. I mean, I've never seen that in my music.
I know it's like a technique that can be used. I haven't personally seen it in any of my music, but it's like comes a lot from like the back of the throat while you're still playing and creates like a really like another like gross sound. I feel like they give a lot of the gross sounds to trombones. They're like, here, you can deal with that.
That's fair. Yeah.
Or maybe like multiphonics
Ooh, okay.
is another one. I had a friend playing euphonium who actually had multiphonics like in a specific concerto piece. I would have to look up the
Oh
name,
yeah.
but it was very cool.
Oh, cool. And do you generally produce multiphonics? Is that a sing and play, or is it something that you can actually, like, manipulate that resonance within the instrument to play two notes at once?
I'm pretty sure like a sing and play, as far as I've done
Yeah,
before, it's still
for
something
sure.
like very untapped
Yeah,
and something I'm
definitely.
still learning how to do very much so. It is like extremely difficult to do. I was so impressed with my friend that did it, and she, the euphonium player, also did like the singing and like the playing at the same time.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. That's something I've been recently getting into too, and it's so much fun, but really, really hard to control at times. And like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Or
and I
like your oh
go ahead.
sorry, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
Or like sometimes if you're playing, the singing sounds good, or vice versa. Like I feel like if I get it, I'm like, oh, like my voice sounds really good, but my tone is like absolutely out the window, or
Oh
vice
yeah.
versa. I'm like, oh, my tone is gorgeous, and then like I'm singing like an absolute muppet into my instrument.
Right, right. No, that can definitely be a challenge. I had a composer who just wrote me a piece with a like the whole piece is basically sing and play. And it's so, so beautiful. But then I had to keep like texting him and being like, so turns out, I know I told you I have this vocal range and this flute range. Turns out those two notes don't work together. Sorry. Like, I don't know why. Physics, probably. Like,
Probably.
yeah. I think that's like it's just such a fun thing to have that like collaboration and definitely being able to like reach out to your performers and be like, "Hello, try this out," and then see what happens. It's a
Yeah.
fun time. Um how so like kind of moving into more just like of your experiences in general and away from like the trombone as cool as it is. How have your personal identities shaped your musical identity? I know this is something we've talked about a little bit before, but if you can kind of give me an overview of that.
Sure. I think when I first started playing trombone, it was very much out of defiance. At the time, currently I identify as non-binary, but I was just like some little girl who just wanted to play this instrument that was seemed like a boy instrument kind of thing.
Yeah.
And as it developed over time, it kind of gave me some spite. I was like, oh, these directors think
Yeah.
I can't play just as loud because I'm a girl, this and that. So I think it fueled a lot of anger in my playing, a good
Yeah.
kind of anger though. And as I learned that I don't have to be so aggressive with my playing, I think my musical identity changed a little bit. So I think once I got to college, started figuring out my gender identity a little bit more. My musical identity grew as well. It's like you don't have to be so angry when you play. You can just play as a person and not,
Yeah.
yeah. more as a human.
Yeah. No, that's really interesting. And I think like this weird like instrument gender stereotype things are super super influential to like young musicians especially. And I know I like thinking back to some other bands that I've played in, there were a lot of like, haha, I'm gonna be the first chair of brass and I'm a woman, and the percentage of those people who still identify as female is very low.
Yep.
Yeah. But I think it like kind of it stems from this weird place of like, oh, the flute's a girl instrument and the trumpet's a boy instrument, and I don't know. It's what is your experience been like with these weird gendered instrument roles, or is it just I don't know. What
It's been
thoughts?
strange.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's strange. I wish that like we could completely start from scratch
Yeah.
on what means what. And I feel like it starts really early. Like you're in fifth grade most of the time when you pick an instrument.
Mhm.
Those ideals and those stereotypes are already like ingrained in your little brain that's super impressionable. Of
Yeah.
course, you're going to want to like either be like me and be super spiteful and go against the grain,
Yeah.
or you're going to want to maybe conform to your peers a little bit more and say, hey, I'm going to play the flute because all my other friends that are girls are playing the flute, or a
Right.
bunch of gross bros are playing the tuba kind of thing.
Yeah.
So it's frustrating that like we start at such a young age when um we're so influenced by that.
Yeah, I remember I was reading a study a couple months ago that was talking about how um, gender association with instruments was prevalent with kids as young as like 3 and 4, I think it was. It was just
Wow.
like mind-blowingly early. And like I for me, like there's a lot of things are gendered unnecessarily, but for me that was one that really hit me where I was like, I'm not even sure exactly where that comes from. Like
Yeah.
there's not an obvious influence for me. Like some things it's like that's weird propaganda that we're putting a gender on this thing. But with instruments, I was like, what are we telling our 1 and 2 year old children? Like
Yeah.
how do we I don't know. It was a weird study that I was just like, oh my gosh, it made me really like reevaluate my life, I guess.
That's so young too. I
It's
even
so
thought,
young.
yeah,
Yeah.
I even thought like 12-year-olds is like super young to like have these things ingrained, but it's so like, oh my God, so ingrained in our society. I'm sure it starts with like the whole like TV, toys, and things already being
For
marketed
sure, for
towards
sure.
kids. Yeah.
Yeah, like everybody picks up a recorder, but then, you know what, yeah. Um Yeah, for sure. And like I know we've sort of begun talking about this with so many like musicians, especially those studying in like a conservatory setting, facing like really serious struggles with mental health. What do you see as the way forward? Is that like a personal interaction thing? Is it a structural change thing? Where does that fit into all of this?
That's a fantastic question. I think it is definitely a structural kind of change. It is very much the idea that you have to practice until you absolutely drop dead.
Hmm.
You have to practice this many hours a day if you're this major, or even
Hmm.
in any kind of major, they're like, oh, you have to do this much. And if you don't do this much, then you're not as good as a musician, you know?
Hmm.
It's it's super toxic for anyone to put that pressure on themselves and maybe just push through when they're not able to push through.
Hmm.
And that's what kind of leads to like a lot of anxiety surrounding practicing for a long time. Oh my God, what if I can't get this done in time? Oh my God, I'm never going to make it in life if I don't practice
Hmm.
this amount of time. It's hard to see because I've struggled with that for a really long time. Um, the very much anxiety and depression can go hand in hand, and for a while um, it was difficult for me to get out of that mindset of if you don't practice for this amount of time, you're going to be a failure. I
Hmm.
think definitely going back to structurally speaking is something we got to like tear down and be like, hey, you can practice as much as you want, just as long as you're like being productive and doing your best, and you're going to make it no matter what, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, one of the things I've tried to work with, I have a couple of students, and like one of the big things that I'm working with them is I very much try to stay away from like, you need to practice 15 minutes a day between now and the next time I see you.
Yeah.
Sometimes I like have to set those boundaries because they show up and they haven't practiced, but like more so focusing on here's how to practice effectively. Here are things that I've, learned to do when I don't, on days that I don't want to practice, that are still useful and helpful and will make you understand the music better. And I think that's like something that is, I don't really know exactly the best way to teach that. I'm kind of like improvising every single time that I'm teaching, really. Um,
Yeah.
but I think that it's something that should be addressed a lot more because, like, why don't I know how to teach that? I have like almost two entire degrees, and what's going on here? But yeah,
It's something that I feel like they just kind of like brush over, and it's something that follows you throughout like your entire life.
yeah,
Um, Even with like undergrad, but also like continuing on in the real world, there are so many upper level musicians that struggle with like substance abuse
hmm,
in the industry, and that's I feel like a result of like years and years of anxiety and depression and
yeah,
constant overthinking. It's so hard to see.
yeah. And I mean, that's honestly like it's a big reason why for both of the degrees that I've gotten, I've chosen to go into composition because for me, I've never been a person who can like establish a practice schedule. And I have tried so many different things and it just like it doesn't work. It doesn't work at all. And I've never been able to establish a good composition schedule really either, but at least composition I can procrastinate on and do at the last minute.
Yeah.
And that's kind of it. Like you can't do that with practicing an instrument. It has to be something like if I went and I practiced for 3 hours the day before right before my lesson,
Yeah.
it's not gonna work. But if I compose for 3 hours right before my lesson, I might get
You
away
can get
with
it
it.
done.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
And it's literally like this whole stigma against like having a sporadic practice or like, oh, you have to practice a minimum of 2 hours a day if you're gonna be serious in any way.
Mhm.
It was terrifying, and I genuinely think that if it hadn't existed I probably would have at least one degree in flute by now. Not that
Yeah.
I'm unhappy as a composer, I don't mean to make it sound that way,
Of
it's just
course.
like
Yeah.
I love composing and I'm really really happy, but it was definitely there's a fear of that culture that I was like, no,
Not for me.
not yeah, yeah, no, it's really tricky.
It's tricky to
Yeah,
navigate because on one hand you do want to be super successful, you want to put in the hard work and you want to put in the time, but on the other half of the time you got to know when to stop.
right,
I had a lot of friends, maybe my freshman, sophomore year, who were playing up to 3 hours a day because they were being told to.
yeah,
And it got to the point where they weren't being productive in those
yeah,
3 hours anymore. It's like the whole practice smarter, not harder.
right, right,
Yeah. I think it's so much easier if you go into a practice room and you have a certain amount of things to get done. You kind of try and set like a rough
yeah,
schedule for yourself. Be like, I'm only going to spend this much time on this certain thing because otherwise it can be counterproductive.
yeah, like scales are really important, but there's only so many scales you can play before you're just playing them to say that you've done them. Like,
Yep.
yeah. And even like there's a method book that the flutists often use called like some 17 daily exercises, I want to say. And one time I was like, I'm going to play through the 17 daily exercises because they're daily. It says on the cover like they should be played every day. It took me 4 hours to play through all 17 daily exercises.
Oh my God.
And that's probably not how they're intended to be used. And most teachers will assign you like two or three. But it still plays into this idea of like, how much do you want to be doing? And like, maybe it's not how it's intended, but on the cover, it does say 17 daily exercises, which would imply 17 exercises to play every day. I don't know. Is that something that like, I don't know, is the sort of mental health side of music tied into the gender side of music in any way that you've seen or I'm curious. I'm like
Oh,
it's not something I've really thought about before, but just yeah.
that's a good question. I like that. I feel like um, a lot of the times that it's taught that like, oh, women are more like emotional and stuff like that, and are more in touch with their emotions, um, which is
Yeah.
can be true, cannot be true. It's kind of sexist, but um that's shoved down women's throats. But I also feel like what's shoved down men's throats is a lot of like, you have to be tough, you can't cry, you can't feel your emotions,
Hmm.
very much so. So I feel like my freshman year in college, I did see a lot of my guy friends kind of start to struggle with mental illness and not reach out for help for it,
Yeah.
because it's been taught their whole life that they can't feel those emotions, or if they do, it's a bad thing. They're seen as
Yeah.
less manly, that kind of thing.
Yeah,
Uh,
for sure.
it's just so hard to see. And oh, there goes my train of thought.
No,
It's
I think it can really be the same or similar experience with like physical health as well. Especially like I know so many people who have had playing injuries, and the people
yeah,
that fight through them are that I in my experience, like I haven't done any research or anything, but in my experience, just observationally, it does seem to be more like male and masculine people who are getting worse and worse injuries, and I would posit that perhaps it is that sort of stigma of like, nah, it's the pain's not that bad.
yeah,
And like I've kind of been somebody who like in the past has sort of in the same sort of like spiteful way, like I'm not gonna be girly because I can deal with pain. And like
exactly.
now I am playing with chronic pain, and it's like it's this
Yeah,
whole it's ugh, why? I don't know.
it must be awful.
It's not a good time. I'm like
Yeah,
always at the chiropractor, and he's like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "I'm just trying to play my flute."
you're like, I'm just trying to be a musician, please.
Yeah, like I'm either playing my flute or I'm like hunched over a laptop, like, "Ooh, sounds." But no, yeah. Um, so what projects are you currently working on? Are there cool projects or pieces that you want to represent, or anything else you'd like to bring to the table?
Ooh, ooh, I think I've been working on this piece for a while now, and I want to audition with it for next semester's Wesleyan does a band competition essentially.
Hmm.
It's this piece called Colors by Bert Appermont, and
Okay.
I fell in love with it. It is the most beautiful thing I've ever heard in my entire life. There are four movements. It goes yellow, red, green, nope, blue, green. And each of them has like this beautiful style. Yellow is like very like light and happy and like almost proud.
Yeah.
Red is a little bit more aggressive, a little quicker. Um, got has lots of fun like slides. Blue is very like melancholy. Oh, I fell in love with blue. I think it really portrays like a lot of things that the trombone can do that isn't expressed a lot of like beautiful legato playing, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And green is like very jovial, very like uh, expressive and stuff like that. I love the piece so much, and each time I play it, I think to myself like, you chose the right career path. Oh, that sounds so
That's
cheesy, but I
no,
love it.
that's so amazing though. I love pieces that are like that. I wish I miss that because I definitely feel that with a couple of pieces that I had in undergrad, and I don't know that I've had that same connection. But
Yeah.
do you know if that composer has synesthesia? Just out of curiosity.
You know,
Um,
I wouldn't be surprised. I would have to look that up, but I would love if they did. That would be so cool to find out.
yeah, I mean that's amazing because I'm also somebody I get pretty strong color associations with music. I don't know if it's like synesthesia level or whatever. I don't know.
Mhm.
But there's definitely where I'll be like, "Ooh, this chord should be greener," and it's like, "Hello, what does that mean?" And it sounds like a really cool. I'm definitely gonna have to check out that piece. Um, I really enjoyed this conversation. It's
Me too.
nice and short and sweet, but I feel like I've really learned so much about trombone and about where you're coming from as a musician, and it's super nice, especially because just like I don't know, chat again. This was awesome.
It's been
Um,
wonderful.
yeah, thank you so much for joining us here at Classical Schmassical. If you at home enjoy the show, there is plenty more where that came from. So do make sure to like and subscribe so you never miss an episode. If you would like to continue the conversation on trombone, personal identity and musicianship, gender roles in music, or mental health, Please join the Discord, linked in the description, or visit our Facebook page at facebook.com/Classical Schmassical. That's Schmassical, SCHMASSICAL. And remember, as always, stay classy and questionably classical.